Once upon a time in the bustling city of Onitsha, there lived a man named Akagom. He was such a handsome man that whenever he walked through the busy streets or the crowded market, heads would turn. He was tall and well-built, with smooth, dark skin and a bright smile that could light up a room. People often whispered that Akagom looked like a movie star or a prince. He dressed in neatly pressed shirts and trousers, though if you looked closely you'd notice they were the same few outfits he rotated for years. His confidence and looks made him stand out. Welcome to Afro Tales TV, your home for rich, exciting, and inspiring stories from around the world. Today's story will touch your heart and keep you hooked till the very end. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our amazing stories. Akagom was not just handsome, he was also a rich businessman. He owned a large spare part shop at Magbuka Main Market in Onitsha. Every day he would open his shop early, selling engine parts, tires, and gears to customers from all over Anambra State and beyond. He was clever in business, known to drive a hard bargain. Other traders called him Oga, boss, out of respect. Many admired how he built his wealth with wise deals and persistence. On market days, he drove up in an old but shiny Mercedes-Benz loaded with goods. He always kept it in good condition with parts from his shop. As he strode through Magbuka Market with confident steps, traders greeted him, and customers smiled, impressed by his success and charm. But Akagom's story wasn't all perfect. Despite the wealth he had gathered and the admiration of strangers, those who knew him closely knew his true nature. You see, Akagom was stingy. So stingy that people joked even glue wasn't as sticky as Akagom's hands when it came to holding on to money. In fact, in Igbo, the nickname for a miser is Akagum, meaning sticky hand, and some whispered that Akagom's name suited him all too well. Akagom had a family of 5, whom he kept tucked away from the public eye. He was 48 years old and lived with his wife and children in a crowded neighborhood in Onitsha. His wife, Chidima, was 42, a kind and patient woman. They had 3 children, Obiageri, the eldest daughter, who was 21 years old, Obianuju, the second daughter, 18 years old, and Obina, the youngest son, 14 years old. One would think that a rich man like Akagom would house his family in a grand home or at least a comfortable apartment. However, Akagom's family lived in a modest, face me, I face you apartment building on the outskirts of the city. For those who don't know, a face me, I face you is a type of housing where a long hallway has small one-room apartments on either side, with doors directly facing each other. Families of 5 or more might all share a single tiny room. Neighbors share bathrooms and kitchens, and often everyone's business becomes public because the living space is so tight. In Akagom's case, he kept his wife and children in one cramped room, barely larger than a storeroom. Because the rent was cheap, their room's door faced another family's room across a narrow corridor. There was hardly any privacy. The laughter, arguments, and cries of various families could be heard through the thin walls. Buckets and cooking pots cluttered the hallway, and the air often smelled of many pots of soup cooking at once in the shared kitchen out back. Despite these crowded and sometimes uncomfortable conditions, Akagom refused to move to a bigger, better place. He didn't want to spend the money on higher rent. Neighbors often gossiped about this strange situation. Can you imagine? One neighbor, Mamangozi, would say, shaking her head. A wealthy man like Akagom living here as if he cannot afford better. Undi ara, crazy people. Another would reply, my sister, it's true, his wife and children dress so plain, you wouldn't know he has money, very stingy man. These conversations happened in whispers when Akagom wasn't around. In public, everyone still greeted him respectfully because of his imposing presence and wealth. Inside the tiny one-room home, Akagom's family lived a strangely restricted life given how rich their father was. Chidima tried her best to keep the home tidy and raise the children well. She was a beautiful woman with kind eyes, though worry had begun to line her face. She loved her husband at heart. After all, she married him when he had little, and together they had come this far. But she often grew frustrated with his stingy ways. Their children had learned not to ask their father for anything unless absolutely necessary, because they knew what his answer would be. One bright Tuesday morning, the sun poured through the single small window of their room. Chidima was preparing a simple breakfast of pap, corn porridge, and akara, bean cakes. She carefully measured the portions under Akagam's watchful eye. Yes. Akagam measured all the food in the house. He had a little notebook where he noted how much gari, cassava flakes, rice or beans was bought, and how quickly it was consumed. He believed this would prevent anyone from overeating, or as he put it, wasting our future. Obina, who was 14, sat on a wooden stool, hungry and hoping for an extra akara. He was a growing boy, and one akara barely filled his tummy halfway. Obianuju, 18, helped her mother fry the akara in a small pan over a charcoal stove. They couldn't use an electric cooker often because Akagam complained about the electric bill. Obiagari, 21, swept the little space in the room and folded up the mats they slept on, stacking them in a corner to make space, since at night the whole family spread mats on the floor to sleep. "Papa, can I take 2 akara?" Obina asked timidly, as Chidima put a modest portion of pap and 1 bean cake on his plate. Akagam, who was adjusting the knot of his tie in a small cracked mirror on the wall, turned around sharply. His tall frame loomed over the boy. "Obina, my son, do you think akara falls from the sky?" he said, arching an eyebrow. "1 is enough for you. You don't need 2. Do you want to eat us out of house and home?" Obina lowered his eyes. "No, sir, I'm just very hungry," he murmured. Chidima felt a pang of sympathy and quietly mouthed to her son to drink more pap to fill his stomach. She dared not openly contradict her husband. Akagam was not violent, but he had a temper in his voice that made everyone else fall silent when he was firm. Obiagari, the eldest, sighed and spoke up softly. "Papa, since Obiina is a growing child, maybe just half more akara for him. He'll be at school till afternoon." Akagam gave his eldest daughter a stern look. "Obiagari, are you questioning me?" Obiagari quickly shook her head. "No, Papa, it's just what?" Akagam boomed, although not really shouting. His voice was deep and commanding. "When I was his age, I ate whatever my parents provided, and I was grateful. Too much food will make him lazy. In fact," he continued, taking the frying spoon from his wife and scooping out an akara from the oil, "this one is extra. I will take it myself." And with that, he took a bite of the hot akara. It burned his tongue a bit and he fanned his mouth, but he pretended everything was fine. The children said nothing, but they exchanged glances. Obina fought back tears of frustration as he spooned his pap slowly to make it last. Obiagari put a comforting hand on his back. Chidima silently served Akagam his breakfast, a slightly larger portion of pap, and now only 1 akara, since he took the extra one meant for Obina. She knew arguing further would only cause a scene and might lead to Akagam leaving the house in anger. When Akagam got angry about money matters, he might refuse to give any housekeeping money for a week, which would make things even harder. The family ate quietly. Akagam, however, decided to lecture to fill the silence. "You children must learn to manage. Some of your mates have nothing to eat at all. Have you thought of that?" "Yes, Papa," the children mumbled. They had heard this many times. Chidima remembered how different things were in the early years of their marriage. Akagam had not been this bad then. Sure, he was careful with money even as a young man, but it had not been so extreme. He used to bring home little gifts now and then, and he took care of her needs when it mattered. But as his business grew and he became more focused on making money, he also became more focused on keeping money. It was as if the more he had, the more afraid he was to lose it. Over the years, his frugality grew into full-blown stinginess. After breakfast, Akagam picked up his briefcase. It was quite old and frayed at the edges. Why buy a new one when this still carries papers just fine? He would always say. He was heading to the market to open his shop. Before leaving, he gave Chidima some instructions for the day, as he often did. I left 2,000 naira on the shelf, he said. That is for the food for the next 3 days. Make sure it is enough. Buy only what is necessary. Gari, a small fish, and some vegetables. Don't waste it on fancy things, no minerals, soft drinks, and no meat today. Fish is healthier anyway. Chidima nodded quietly. She thought to herself that in 2,000 naira in 3 days for a family of 5 was extremely tight, almost impossible with the current food prices. She might have to add some of her little secret savings or buy on credit from the market women she was friendly with. But she dared not ask for more. She knew Akagom would claim even N2000 was generous. Akagom then fixed each child with a steady gaze. Obiageri and Obianuju, help your mother. And Obiageri, you should be reading those accounting books I got you. One day you can help in the shop. No need to go waste money on university when you can learn business under me. Obiageri forced a polite smile. In truth, she longed to go to university like some of her friends or learn a profession. She had done well in secondary school and even got admitted to a local college, but Akagom refused to pay the tuition. What's the point, he had said. After spending hundreds of thousands on school, you will still come and be looking for work. Better join me and earn money immediately. Obiageri felt bitter about this, but had no choice. Yes, Papa, she replied quietly. Obianuju, you will soon finish secondary school. You better focus. Don't get any fancy ideas either. We don't have money to waste on nonsense, Akagom said to his second daughter. He always assumed any personal aspiration was nonsense if it cost money. Obianuju, 18, loved music and had dreamed of going to music school or at least pursuing some training, but she already knew her father's answer to such plans. So she simply answered, Yes, Papa, as well. Finally, he looked at his son. Obina, go straight to school and come straight home, eh? No buying snacks on the way. Use your head. By use your head, Akagom meant to solve any needs without spending money. Obina mustered a small, respectful, Yes, Papa. He had already prepared some gari in a flask to take to school. At lunchtime, he would soak the gari in water and eat it with a little sugar, if he was lucky to get sugar. Many of his classmates would have some money to buy meat pies or rice at the school canteen, but not Obina. Akagom believed giving a 14-year-old pocket money was unnecessary. Carry food from home, he said. It's the same stomach it will enter. As Akagom stepped out into the corridor to leave, a neighbor greeted him. Good morning, sir. It was Papa Chijioke from the room opposite, a man of modest means who always saw Akagom as something of a mystery. Akagom responded with a polite nod and a slight smile, not one to encourage too much small talk. He locked the door to his room with a hefty padlock. His family remained inside, but he always locked up any time he left, even if they were still home, to keep the property secure. The property mainly being the old TV, a fan, and his precious savings hidden somewhere inside. Chidima had a spare key to let herself out later, but Akagom didn't entirely trust leaving the room unlocked. He briskly walked out of the compound. The day had begun for him. Inside, after he left, the atmosphere visibly lightened. The children and their mother relaxed a bit, and Obina finally said what was on all their minds. I'm still hungry. Chidima sighed and went to the small pot where a couple more akara balls sat drained of oil. She quietly split one and gave half to Obina and half to Obianuju. Then she poured a little more pap for Obiageri, who insisted her siblings should have it instead. They tried to share quietly so that if Akagom happened to pop back in, sometimes he did if he forgot something, he wouldn't catch them overeating. Obiageri rolled her eyes playfully once her father was truly gone. Our father is something else, she muttered in English laced with Igbo accent. Humph, Obianuju pouted. Ada M., my elder sister. Can you imagine him taking food from his own son? Handsome or not, that attitude is ugly. She kept her voice low. Years of caution made them almost whisper such complaints. Chidima simply said, "Biko, please. My children manage like this. Someday things will be better." She always tried to comfort them, though she herself was not sure when or how it would be better. In truth, they had enough money as a family, but it was locked away by Akagam's stinginess. Obiageri smiled at her mother. At least he's gone to market now. Let's get on with the day. She and Obianuju began clearing up the dishes and tidying the room more. Chidima prepared to go to the market to buy the day's ingredients with the little money given. She knew almost every trader there because sometimes she had to bargain very hard, explaining her situation. Some felt pity and gave discounts or small extras, a few extra pepper fruits or bones for soup. Others would grumble that it wasn't fair that a rich man's family was begging for better prices. One fish seller once told Chidima, "Madam, your husband is rich. Why is he pricing nungwongwo, scraps, like a poor man? Echezola uzo onye, don't disgrace the man, and buy better fish." Chidima had felt so embarrassed she nearly cried, but she couldn't spend more than a kagome allowed. True to routine, at the market that day, Chidima carefully spent only N1,500 of the N2,000, getting some gari, a few tomatoes and peppers, some vegetables, and a small smoked fish for soup. She saved N500 aside in her headscarf. She had learned to save a little whenever possible, even if it was N200 or N500 here or there, tucking it away in her old purse hidden among her clothes. That secret stash was for emergencies, like a needed medicine or school expense when Akagam wouldn't provide. It wasn't much, but over time she had scraped together a small emergency fund without Akagam's knowledge. Meanwhile, at Mungbuka Spare Parts Market, Akagam was in his element. His shop was located in a large open shed among rows and rows of other spare parts dealers. The market bustled with activity. Traders shouting in Igbo and Pidgin English to attract customers, buyers haggling for a better price, and the clanging sounds of metal parts being offloaded from trucks. The sun was hot and the air smelled of engine oil and dust. Akagam's stall was filled with shelves of car parts, brake pads, spark plugs, carburetors, you name it. He sat on a swivel chair behind a counter, a small fan whirring at him, powered by a car battery, since electricity in the market was unreliable, and he wouldn't spend on a generator for the shop either, instead cleverly using a spare car battery to run the fan. A customer walked in, wiping sweat from his brow. "Good morning, sir. I need a Toyota Camry alternator," the man said. "Good morning. You've come to the right place," Akagam replied with a charming smile. He stood and pulled an alternator off a shelf. "Top quality, original one," he said, dusting it off. They began to bargain over the price. If there was one thing Akagam enjoyed, it was bargaining, especially selling at a high price and buying at a low price. After some back and forth, they agreed on a price that gave Akagam a tidy profit. The customer paid in cash. Akagam took the money, and rather than putting it in a register like some shops did, he immediately slipped the notes into a deep inner pocket of his jacket. He had sewn an extra inner pocket for this purpose, to keep money very close to himself. He patted his jacket, satisfied, and handed the alternator over. As the customer left, one of Akagam's fellow traders, OK, leaned over from the next stall and joked, "Akagam, you're smiling today, oh. That must have been a good sale." Akagam chuckled modestly. "We thank God, market is moving small. He never boasted loudly, always praying to not draw envy or attention to exactly how much he made. OK grinned. "My guy, you will buy us mineral soft drink today to celebrate, Abi." In Nigerian markets, it's common to treat friends to a soft drink or snack when business goes well. Akagam immediately shook his head with a laugh. "Haba, okay. The day hasn't even ended. Let me not count my chicks before they hatch. Then he changed the topic. By the way, can you imagine my landlord increased shop rent by 5% this year? Pure wickedness. I have to save more now to be ready. OK knew Akagam was dodging the idea of spending money on drinks. He teased, "No worry, we know you, you're aka Gum, your hand no day ever open, your hand never opens. Even one bottle of Coke you won't die if you buy." Akagam waved him off with a playful scolding look. "Go and mind your customers, Jur, please." Both men laughed. Akagam could handle the teasing. In fact, he wore it as a strange badge of pride. Being known as careful with money meant no one would bother asking him for loans or extravagances often. However, not everyone found it endearing. As the day went by, a young boy in tattered clothes passed by the front of the shop, begging. "Oga, sir, help me, even if it's small money for bread," the boy pleaded, looking truly hungry. Akagam frowned. He did not like beggars. He often thought they just didn't work hard enough. He reached under his counter and the boy's eyes lit up. Maybe the man was about to give him something, but Akagam brought out a half-eaten packet of crackers, biscuits, he had from earlier. He tossed it at the boy. "Take and go. No disturb my customers." The boy took it looking a bit disappointed, but mumbled, "Thank you," and left. Akagam had refused to even part with N50 for the boy. Inside, he justified it. "I work hard for my money. I can't be giving it away like that." At least I gave him something to eat. Back at home that afternoon, Obina returned from school tired and sweaty. He had walked home because even though many of his classmates took the bus or a kiki, tricycle taxi, he knew better than to ask his father for transport fare. The midday sun was harsh and his feet ached, but he was excited about one thing. That day, his teacher had announced a planned excursion for the students to visit a science museum in Enugu. It would cost each student some money for the bus and entry fee. Obina had listened with both excitement and dread. He loved the idea of seeing a museum and traveling out of Onitsha. He rarely had left the city. But the cost was N5,000 per student. He already feared what his father would say. Maybe, he thought, Papa will agree since it's educational. When Obina got home, he found his mother and sisters sorting vegetables. They smiled at him and asked about school. After chatting with them for a bit, Obina gulped and decided to bring up the excursion before his father got home. Perhaps his mother could help convince him later. "Mama, my teacher said we have an excursion next month to a science museum in Enugu. It will help us learn and see new things," Obina explained. Chidima looked at her son's hopeful face and knew the next part. Softly she asked, "How much will it cost?" 5,000 naira, he said, then added quickly, "We have a month to pay it. They will go by bus. Mama, I have never been outside Onitsha. I really want to go. I'll learn a lot, and it might help me in choosing what I want to be in the future." He tried to make it sound as useful as possible. Obiageri and Obianuju paused to listen. They both felt a pinch of sorrow, knowing how this was likely to play out. They had their share of denied requests in the past. Chidima bit her lip. And 5,000 wasn't a huge sum for them considering Akagam's earnings, but asking him to part with it for a trip would be hard. Still, she wanted her children to have normal experiences. "We will tell your father when he is in a good mood," she said, patting Obina's shoulder. "Let's hope for the best." Obianuju chimed in with a grin. "Maybe if we serve him a very nice supper and massage his feet, he'll say yes." She was half joking, half serious about trying to butter him up. They all laughed a little. Humor was one way they coped with the difficulty. Obiageri said, yes, make his favorite onugbu, bitter leaf soup, with the smoked fish. He might be happy enough. So they planned. Chidima indeed decided to cook a tasty bitter leaf soup that evening, using the smoked fish she bought, and even adding some chunks of stockfish a kind neighbor had given her earlier. The neighbor had received some goods from her village, and kindly shared a piece of dried stockfish with Chidima, knowing her situation. Evening came, and Akagam returned home from the market. He looked a bit tired but content. Sales were good. As he entered the compound, he immediately noticed a savory aroma wafting through the corridor. The smell of delicious soup was unmistakable. He hummed, both surprised and pleased. Usually Chidima kept meals very basic, but today the scent was rich with spices and ogiri, a local seasoning, and bitter leaf. His stomach rumbled. He unlocked the door and stepped in. "Nwunye M, my wife, I am home," he announced. The children were seated around, and Chidima was just dishing out the freshly made soup into plates, with some gari, iba, ready as the accompaniment. "Welcome, my husband. How was the market today?" Chidima greeted, wiping her hands and taking his briefcase to set aside. "Market was fine, we thank God." Something smells good," Akagam said, a small smile creeping over his face despite himself. "Yes, oh, Papa. We made your favorite bitter leaf soup," Obianuju said in a cheerful tone. She brought a bowl of water for her father to wash his hands, since they would eat swallow food with fingers in the traditional way. Akagam washed his hands, still eyeing the soup appreciatively. He settled on the only armchair in the room, a somewhat old, upholstered chair that was a bit cramped in the small space, but it was the one seat of honor that he used. The others sat on a bench or on the edge of the bed or mats. The family joined him for dinner. They set their plates on a small center table. Akagam's plate had a respectable mound of gari and a good ladle of soup with some pieces of fish. The others had slightly smaller portions, as was customary due to rationing, but tonight was better than many nights thanks to the extra ingredients. They all said a short prayer of thanks for the meal. As they ate, Akagam actually seemed relaxed. The soup was delicious. "This is good," he said, nodding in approval. Chidima seized the moment of relative goodwill. "I'm glad you like it, my husband." She waited a minute, and then glanced at Obina, giving him a subtle nod to bring up the matter. Obina cleared his throat softly. "Papa," he began. "Yes?" Akagam said, focusing on his food. At school today, our teacher told us about a science excursion, a trip for the students to go to Enugu and visit a museum and science fair. It's next month." Akagam looked up, listening but not reacting yet, so Obina continued, "It would be a great learning opportunity for me. They will teach us many things and show us machines and experiments." Akagam set down his ball of gari and dipped it in soup thoughtfully. A science trip. Enugu is not far." This seemed like a promising sign. He hadn't said no immediately. "The school is arranging buses. They just need the students to contribute 5,000 naira each for transport, food, and entry fees." Obina finished quickly, his heart thumping. At the mention of money, Akagam's face hardened slightly. He swallowed his mouthful. The room felt tense. Chidima jumped in softly. "Na, Anyi, our father. I think it would really help him. Obina is very bright. You know he loves science. It might encourage him to do even better in his studies." Obiageri added, "Yes, Papa, he's been talking about it all afternoon. All his friends are hoping to go." Hakagam wiped his hand on a cloth and leaned back, looking at the expectant faces around him. In his mind, N5000 was not huge, but he always calculated what else N5000 could do. That's 2 weeks of soup ingredients, he thought. A whole month of school lunch if packed from home. He already began to justify a refusal. "Well," he said slowly, "I'm not sure it's necessary. Obina, you have textbooks you learn in class. Why do you need to travel to learn? Everything in that museum, your teacher can just explain it in class or show pictures." Obina felt his throat tighten. "Papa, it's not the same as seeing it in real life. They will have real scientists showing us things. I promise I will pay close attention, and maybe it will even help me decide on a career. Papa, I want to be an engineer." Akagam raised a hand to stop the pleading. Obina's voice trailed off. Chidima tried another approach. She quietly reached for the bag where she kept money. "If it's too much, I have saved a little from what you give me. I can add." Akagam frowned deeply. The idea of spending money still didn't sit right. "No," he said firmly. "We have more important things to save for. What if some emergency happens? We can't throw away 5,000 just like that on a pleasure trip." "But it's not a pleasure trip. It's educational," Obianuju said before she could stop herself. Akagom gave her a sharp look. "Education, pleasure, whatever you call it, it's not essential. You all must learn that money is not plucked from trees. I work hard for every naira. Obina, you said the trip is next month. Maybe by then I will think about it." He said that just to end the conversation. In his mind, he had already decided it was a waste. He just didn't want to argue further over dinner. The children recognized this tactic. "Maybe later" usually meant "no, but I don't want to say it now." Akagom then changed the subject. "Obiageri, did you balance the accounts I gave you to practice?" Obiageri forced a smile. "Almost, Papa. I'll show you after dinner." The rest of the dinner was quieter. The delicious meal had momentarily raised hopes, but now a gloom hung in the air. Only Akagom seemed relatively unbothered as he finished his food, enjoying the taste and satisfied that he had handled the request without actually giving in. After eating, Chidima and the children cleared the dishes. Akagom washed his hands again and settled in his armchair to relax. Evening was one of the rare times he would allow himself to enjoy a little leisure. He had a small television, an old TV set that was placed on a rickety table. It had an antenna made of a coat hanger. Often the reception was fuzzy, but he managed to catch the news or a favorite show occasionally. Electricity was currently on, a small miracle in that part of town where power cuts were frequent. The fan whirred faintly overhead, an old ceiling fan that clattered as it spun. It needed repair, but he refused to hire an electrician, so it always made a racket. He wouldn't buy a generator either, so if NEPA, the electric company, took light, the family would just endure the darkness or heat. Tonight they were lucky to have light. Chidima quietly instructed Obiageri and Obianuju to fetch water from the compound's single tap. Running water was not reliable, so every evening they filled buckets for use. Obina had some homework, which he started by the dim light, hoping power would stay until he finished. Akagom flipped through the TV channels and settled on a local news broadcast. As he watched, he thought about the day's earnings. He had made good sales, about N150,000 after cost price. Of course, not all profit, but a good chunk was profit. He patted his hand against that inner pocket of his, where the cash from day sales rested. A content feeling filled him whenever he remembered it was there. After the news, an old comedy movie came on TV, one of those Nollywood films where the famous comedians Aki and Paw Paw acted as mischievous characters. Ironically, the title was Aka Gum, meaning stingy man, and it featured a story of a miserly rich man. The children noticed this coincidence and glanced at their father to see if he would react, but he either didn't catch the title or pretended not to. As laughter from the TV show filled the room, Chidima decided to broach another subject on her mind. She often waited until he was in a relaxed mood to bring up household needs. "My husband," she started softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "The roof has been leaking whenever it rains. Today, the neighbor mentioned that the rainy season is coming in heavy this year. Perhaps we should finally fix the roof. The carpenter said it would cost about $10,000 to patch the leaks and change a few bad sheets." Akagom tore his gaze from the TV and looked at the ceiling, as though assessing the truth of her words. Indeed, there were brown water stains in one corner, where last year's rains had dripped through. He had placed a bucket there whenever it rained to catch the water. "It's only a few months of rain," he said dismissively. "We have the bucket, and the leaking isn't that bad. $10,000 is too much to spend on this landlord's house. It's not even my own house. Why should I fix it?" Chidima responded, "Because we live here and our bed got wet last time, remember? The children had to squeeze together on one side." Akagom waved his hand. We'll manage. Just move the bed a little when it's raining and the bucket will catch the rest. Tell the carpenter not now, perhaps after this rainy season, when he's desperate for work, he'll do it cheaper." He returned his attention to the TV. That was that. Chidima sighed. "Manage," he always said. How long could they manage everything? She looked at her children. They deserved a better life than this constant lack, especially when there was money right there with their father. Despite her frustration, she kept quiet the rest of the night. The children finished their tasks and homework. One by one, they prepared for bed. The family didn't have much space, so when it was time to sleep, the routine was almost choreographed. The girls unrolled two thin foam mattresses on the floor. Obina had a small mat he laid near the door, and Akagom and Chidima slept on the bed, an old, squeaky double bed they had owned since marriage. It was cramped with all of them in one room, but this was their life. Before sleeping, Akagom did something he did every night. He checked on his money. In the corner of the room there was a large old trunk, a metal box. Inside that trunk he kept important documents and some of his money savings, usually locked with a padlock. But the majority of his money, the cash he had been stashing for years, was in a special place. Tucked under the bed was a big Ghana must-go bag. It was one of those large woven plastic bags in a red, blue, and white checkered pattern. Many Nigerians use them for carrying loads or storing items. Akagom's Ghana must-go bag was stuffed with bundles of cash. He used bank accounts minimally. He distrusted banks. "They will just take charges, or government will start asking how I got money," he often argued. Instead, he converted much of his profit to cash and hid it at home. Over time, the bundles of Naira notes had grown so much that he needed the biggest bag to hold them. Every night when he thought everyone else was asleep, though often Chidima was awake pretending, Akagom would pull out the bag to inspect it. He would untie the rope he had used to secure the top, peep inside to make sure all was safe, and sometimes even lovingly thumb through the wads of money. The sight of thick bundles of N1000 and N500 notes made him smile with pride and relief. It was his safety net, his treasure. In moments of worry, touching that money calmed him. This night was no different. He quietly slid the bag out. Unknown to him, Obiageri saw him through half-closed eyes. She had seen him do this ritual before and always felt a knot of anger in her stomach. If only he would use even a fraction of that on the family's needs, their life would be so much better. She never said anything, though. Confronting her father about money was like poking a sleeping crocodile. Akagom finished his check, retied the bag, double-checked the padlock on the trunk for good measure, and then pushed the heavy bag back under the bed. Satisfied that his wealth was secure, he lay down to sleep. The room was dark now. Power had gone out just as they were drifting off, and the fan had stopped, making the air still and warm. In the darkness, only soft breathing and distant noise from other tenants could be heard. Akagom's family lay awake at times, each with their own thoughts. Chidima stared at the ceiling, thinking, maybe I should involve his elder brother to talk sense into him. Akagom's older brother lived in the village and had once scolded Akagom that a man's wealth was meant to care for his household first, but Akagom had dismissed it then. If only he would change, she thought wistfully. Obiageri thought about how she could get a job secretly to save money for her schooling, but it would be hard without her father knowing. If she went to work, her father would likely just reduce the money he gave at home. Thinking she didn't need support, it felt hopeless. Obianuju dreamed of one day singing on a stage, but brushed it off, thinking, maybe in another life. At least now we have enough to eat, even if just enough. I'll endure. But she promised herself if she ever had money, she would never be like Papa. Obina, young and idealistic, still held a tiny hope that maybe his father would change his mind about the excursion. He imagined seeing real scientists and was determined that if he couldn't go, he would still find a way to learn. Perhaps his teacher could help him with books. Akagam, ironically, slept peacefully with one hand almost dangling off the side of the bed, near where his money bag was hidden. He was content, believing he was doing the right thing, saving for the future. Days turned into weeks, and the family's routine went on. Akagam's stinginess persisted in numerous little ways that caused his family annoyance or pain. One evening, Obianuju developed a bad fever and chills. It seemed like malaria. She was shivering and could barely sit up. Chidima was very worried and wanted to take her to the clinic down the road. The clinic visit and malaria treatment might cost about N10,000, N15,000 perhaps. When Akagom came home and saw Obianuju lying under layers of blankets, sweating and weak, he clicked his tongue in concern but then immediately said, "Malaria. Just malaria. No need for hospital." Chidima objected. "She's very weak. We should get her tested and maybe an injection or proper medicine. The pills I gave her aren't bringing the fever down." Akagam shook his head. "Why spend so much? I bought malaria medicine last year. Check the drawer." He referred to a leftover partial pack of chloroquine tablets, a bit expired. Chidima held them, uncertain. "These are old and might not be enough." "She can take them first. They will work," Akagam insisted. "Also, cook bitter leaf with water and let her drink the water. It helps fever." Obianuju moaned from the bed. "Papa, please, I feel terrible. Maybe a doctor." But Akagam stood firm. "You will be fine, my dear. Your mother will take good care of you at home. Hospital is just going to take our money, and all they will say is, 'Take rest and drink water.' Exactly what you can do here. It's the same treatment, trust me." He spoke kindly, but with a stubborn finality. Chidima had to make do. She used cool cloth on Obianuju's head through the night, gave her the old pills and herbal concoctions as Akagam suggested. It took Obianuju a full week to recover her strength. Perhaps the mild malaria ran its course, perhaps the minimal treatment helped a bit. But the family knew she suffered longer than she might have if proper care was given. Akagam, however, acted triumphant. "See, you are well now. I told you it would be okay without wasting money on doctors." Obianuju just nodded weakly. Inside, they all simmered with frustration. But what could they do? Another instance was about clothing. Obiageri had just turned 21, and a cousin of hers was getting married in the village. Obiageri was invited to be on the bridal train, which meant she needed a nice dress. All the girls were to wear a uniform style of dress known as aso ebi. The dress would cost some money to sew. When she brought this up to her father, hoping at least this once he'd agree since it was a family occasion, Akagam said, "Why do you need a new dress? Don't you have a nice dress already? You young girls always want new clothes for every little event. When your mother married me, she had 2 good dresses. 2, and she made them last." Chidima chimed in. "We could adjust one of her old dresses, but the bride specifically chose a style and fabric. It's kind of expected to match others." Akagam waved his hand firmly. "They'll have to understand. If they really want her to match, they should provide the dress. I'm not spending what I don't have to." Ashamed, Obiageri ended up not participating in the bridal train. She attended the wedding in an older dress, telling her relatives that her father could not afford the aso ebi, which made a few of them raise eyebrows, knowing he was well off. Obiageri tried to laugh it off with her cousins, but it hurt her pride and happiness. She was one of the bride's favorite younger cousins, but had to sit quietly instead of standing with the wedding party. Little sacrifices and disappointments like these piled up in the family's hearts. Akagam even controlled small daily things to save money. He would forbid the children from using the light bulb in the daytime. Open the window, sunlight is free. He limited the use of the one old air conditioner they had, a small window unit they'd gotten years ago, to only the hottest of hot days because he worried about the electric bill. Most nights they slept with just a fan, or no fan when power was out, sweating. When power was gone, he wouldn't hear of renting or buying a small generator called I Pass My Neighbor, which many neighbors used. The noise and the fuel cost are not worth it. Others can waste their money, not me, he insisted. So in darkness they often remained until power came back. Their tap in the compound had broken once, and instead of contributing with other tenants to fix it, Akagam made his family walk 2 streets away to fetch water from a public borehole, just to avoid paying the plumber's share of N1000. His logic: why pay when you can get it for free elsewhere? A little exercise to fetch water won't kill anyone. The neighbors were annoyed by this because every other tenant contributed except him, yet his family still used the water after others paid. When they confronted him saying it wasn't fair, Akagam retorted, "If the landlord doesn't fix it, I'm not obliged. Complain to the landlord." Eventually the tap was fixed by the landlord after much delay. But Akagam had strained neighborly relations. He earned a silent reputation in the neighborhood as the rich man with poor habits. People pitied Chidima and the children. One day, Mama Ifeoma, a jovial neighbor, sat with Chidima by the communal outdoor cooking area. She gently broached the subject. "Nwunyam, I hope you are coping. Men like your husband, it's not easy. Why is he so bent on saving every kobo? Who is he saving it for, if not for you and the children to enjoy life?" Chidima shrugged and gave a sad smile. "He always says it's for the future. I don't know what else to call it but stinginess. But what can I do? I try to manage. At least he doesn't drink or gamble or chase other women. It's just this money matter." Mama Ifeoma clucked her tongue. "Better soup na money cook am," she said, quoting the common saying. "If you want life to be sweet, you have to spend money. Well, God is your strength, my sister. One day those who hold too tight will have to let go." Chidima found some comfort in these chats, though she never spoke ill of her husband in public. She just said, "I'm praying for him to realize before it's too late." Well, that day of realization was coming faster than anyone knew. The months rolled by, and soon the heavy rains of the season arrived. The leaky roof Akagam refused to fix became a real nuisance. One stormy night, water dripped steadily into their room. The bucket placed under the leak was filling up fast. As thunder rumbled, a miserable scene unfolded. The family woke at 2 a.m. to move their bedding away from the leaky area. Akagam himself got up, grumbling, and placed a second bucket because the first was overflowing onto the floor. A big drop of water plopped right onto his forehead as he was adjusting the bucket, and he jumped back. "Chineke. Good God," he cursed under his breath, wiping his face. He was drenched from that corner. The children, though half asleep, couldn't help but giggle quietly at the sight of their father startled by the water attack. Irritable, Akagam said, "You see, the landlord should fix this nonsense. I will call him tomorrow." He always said that, but rarely actually bothered, since landlord might expect tenants to share the cost. Chidima gave him a pointed look. "If we had fixed it earlier." "Shh, let's just manage tonight," he cut her off. They got through that night, but the next morning the floor was slippery, and some of their clothes stored in a corner had gotten soaked. The children were late to school trying to dry things out. Akagam left for work in a foul mood as his shoes had gotten wet, and he had to wear an older pair. Still, even that incident did not loosen his purse strings. He simply nagged the landlord more via phone, and waited. Akagam was 48 years old, and though he was strong and hardly ever sick, years of stress and joyless toil can affect anyone. One day, as the heavy rains of July poured over Onitsha, Akagam fell ill. It started as a mild headache and tiredness. He had gotten drenched at the market while unloading a shipment of spare parts. He volunteered to carry many heavy boxes himself, to avoid paying laborers, of course. He came home late that night, shivering and wet, with rainwater dripping from his normally well-combed hair. Chidima was concerned when she saw him. "You're soaked. Come, get out of those wet clothes," she said, guiding him to sit down. Akagam sat on the edge of the bed, feeling dizzy. He had refused to take a taxi or bus home in the rain, choosing to ride on the back of an Okada motorcycle taxi because it was cheaper, and he ended up cold and damp. Now, as he tried to pull off his shoes, his head spun. Chidima quickly fetched a towel to dry him off. She could feel he was getting a fever. His skin was warm and he was coughing lightly. "I'll make hot tea for you," Chidima offered, "and please, you need to rest. You look not well, my husband." Akagom, stubborn as ever, waved a hand. "It's nothing, just a little cold. I'll be fine by morning," he insisted, though his voice was weaker than usual. He lay down, wrapping himself in an old threadbare blanket. All night he tossed and turned, sweating and then getting chills. Chidima hardly slept, listening to his heavy breathing and quiet groans. By morning, Akagom's condition was worse. He tried to get up at his usual time to head to the market, but as soon as he stood, a wave of dizziness hit him and he slumped back onto the bed. His forehead was burning hot. Obiageri came with a bowl of water and a cloth to wipe his face. "Papa, you're very hot," she said, worried. Akagom felt miserable. Headache, fever, body pains. Yet when Chidima said, "Well, we should go to the hospital now," Akagom refused outright. No hospital," he said hoarsely. "It's just fever. Get me some Panadol and let me rest. I cannot waste money on a hospital for a common fever." He coughed hard right after saying this, which did not make his claim of common fever very convincing. Chidima was beside herself with worry. She knew this was likely malaria or something that needed urgent care. She pleaded with him, "Please, Akagom, let's at least get a test. We can go to the pharmacy for a quick malaria test. It's not too expensive." But Akagom was extremely stubborn. In his feverish state, his stingy instincts only grew stronger, as if he feared that falling ill was going to make him lose control of his money. "No test," he muttered. "I just need rest. You want those pharmacists and doctors to cheat me? They will just eat my money and still tell me to rest. I can rest at home for free." He attempted a weak chuckle at his own joke. Obianuju and Obina stood at a corner of the room, anxious. They had never seen their father this sick. Obina whispered, "Mama, maybe we should call Uncle Okwudili or a neighbor to help take Papa to the clinic." Chidima nodded. She decided she would call Okwudili, Akagom's friend, since he was a reasonable man. Perhaps he could persuade her husband. She stepped outside the room and asked a neighbor's boy to quickly run to Magbuka Market and find Okwudili at the battery stall. The boy dashed off with an umbrella under the drizzling rain. Meanwhile, Akagom was getting more delirious. He was half awake, half asleep, mumbling things. At one point, as the children tried to cool him with the wet cloth, he suddenly grabbed Obiageri's hand and said, "Don't touch my money. I won't spend it. I won't spend it." The girl pulled her hand away, startled. "Papa, it's me, Obiageri. I'm not touching your money. I'm just trying to help you." Akagom didn't seem to hear her. His mind was foggy with fever and fear. It was as if, even in illness, the thought of his money being used worried him more than his health. Chidima re-entered the room and realized with alarm what Akagom was muttering. She knew that convincing him to get help was going to be a battle. An hour later, Okwudili arrived, out of breath and soaked from rushing in the rain. He found Akagom lying on the bed, moaning softly, his eyes closed. The Ghana must-go bag full of money was right beside Akagom, and to Okwudili's astonishment, Akagom had tied one end of a rope around the bag and the other end around his own waist. It was a bizarre sight. Okwudili had heard jokes that his friend would tie his money to himself, but he never thought he'd literally see it happen. Chidima explained that in the early morning, as she and the kids tried to persuade Akagom to go to the hospital, he became agitated about his money bag. He had struggled to his feet, dragged out the heavy bag from its hiding spot, and insisted on tying it to his body. He was afraid if we took him to hospital, someone might steal the bag while he's away, Chidima said in a low voice, embarrassed. He wouldn't even let me touch the bag. He kept saying, "All my life savings. I won't leave it for thieves." I won't let anyone spend it foolishly." So he tied it with that rope to himself, and then he collapsed back on the bed. Okwudili shook his head sadly. He sat on a stool next to Akagam and spoke firmly. "Akagam, it's me, Okwudili. Can you hear me, my friend?" Akagam opened his eyes a crack. He recognized Okwudili and managed a weak groan. "Okwudili, my money. Watch my money," he muttered. Okwudili almost wanted to slap sense into him, but he controlled himself. "Forget the money now. Biko, please, think of your life. You are very sick. We need to take you to hospital. You can't get well sitting here like this." He motioned to Obina. "My boy, help me. We will carry your father to my car and go to the hospital. I brought my car." When Akagam heard my car and hospital, he became strangely alert despite his fever. He clutched the Ghana Must Go bag tightly and shook his head side to side, sweat flying. "No hospital," he rasped. "I won't go. They will ask for money. Tests. Drips. No." Okwudili tried to argue. "But you might die, Akagom. What use is money if you die? Are you hearing yourself?" He gestured in frustration at Chidima, who had tears in her eyes. The children were now openly sobbing in the background, scared for their father. Akagam closed his eyes and turned away. He was too weak to fight physically, but he refused to agree. In his mind, he believed he could beat this illness on his own. Spending perhaps tens of thousands on hospital bills was unthinkable to him. He had never spent such a sum in one go for any family need, and he wasn't about to start now, not even for himself. Seeing that Akagam would not consent, Okwudili made a tough decision. He stood and said to Chidima, "He's not listening, but we must act. If we force him into the car, he'll struggle. I will go get a nurse I know to come and give him an injection, at least something for the fever. Maybe that will help a bit." Chidima nodded, although she had little hope an injection at home would be enough. Okwudili left to fetch the nurse. All day, Akagam's fever raged. A nurse did come and gave him an injection for fever and hydration salts for dehydration. He slept fitfully after that, clutching the rope that tied him to his money bag. By nightfall, his breathing grew labored. Chidima sat by his side, sponging his face. She was exhausted and heartbroken. She whispered softly, "Na'ani, our father. Please, you have to get better. Who will take care of us if you go? We need you, not your money." In her heart, she added, "If only you understood that while alive." Akagam didn't respond. He was barely conscious. Throughout that night, the rain poured and the wind howled outside. Inside the tiny room, it was eerily quiet except for Akagam's heavy breaths and an occasional murmur when he stirred. The children huddled together in one corner, having cried until they had no tears left, praying silently for Papa to recover. Chidima continued to keep vigil. Around midnight, Akagam opened his eyes one last time. In the dim light of the lantern, he saw the worried face of his wife and the shadowy forms of his children in the corner. Perhaps a flicker of realization passed through his fevered mind, that these were the people he had worked so hard for, yet hardly showed love to in the way they needed. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but only a faint croak came out. Chidima leaned closer. "Did you say something?" Akagam's lips trembled. I'm... It was unclear if he was trying to say, "I'm sorry," or "I'm okay," or something else. A tear rolled down the side of his face. Chidima gently wiped it, holding his hand. It was the first time in years she had seen him shed a tear. But before he could form more words, a violent shiver ran through Akagam's body, and then he fell still. His hand went limp in Chidima's grasp. Akagam had passed away. For a moment, Chidima didn't realize what had happened. "Akagam," she called softly. No answer. "Akagam, please wake up." She shook him lightly, but he lay motionless, eyes closed as if in deep peace. The rope still tied him to his beloved money bag, which now held no meaning to the man who had died. A low wail escaped Chidima's throat as reality set in. The children heard and immediately burst into tears again, this time knowing their father was gone. In the middle of the night, the cries of the family rose in the small room. Neighbors woke up and rushed over carrying lamps and offering condolences. Okwudili, who had stayed in the yard, too anxious to go home, came inside and bowed his head. "Ah, Akagom, you have gone just like that," he said softly, wiping his own eyes. Despite all his faults, Akagom was their father and husband, and the family mourned him. Obiageri cried for the loving dad she wished she had. Obianuju cried because despite everything, she didn't want him to die. Obina cried loudly because he was still young and the loss was scary. Chidima held her children, weeping with them. It was a sad night in the Face Me, I Face You compound, as other tenants tried to comfort the grieving family. In the morning, after the rain stopped and the sun rose weakly, the practical matters of death came. Some elders among the neighbors and church members came to help arrange Akagom's burial. It was to be a simple affair. His body would be taken to his hometown the next day for burial, as is custom, with only a small wake that evening. When Chidima started to think about the expenses, coffin, transportation, etc., she felt a stab of worry. How would they afford it? Then her eyes fell on the Ghana must-go bag, still chained to the bed and tied to Akagom's waist. A bittersweet realization came to her. The money. They had money, his money, which he had refused to spend even in dire need. Now, ironically, that very money would have to be used to bury him. Carefully, Chidima untied the rope from Akagom's waist. The neighbors helped unlock the chain. They opened the big bag. Everyone's eyes widened at the sight. Stacks upon stacks of Naira notes bundled and wrapped. Some bundles were old and brownish, savings from many years back. Some were newer. There were even some US dollars in an envelope, maybe from an old business deal, and some shiny coins at the bottom of the bag. It was a small fortune, amassed over years of extreme frugality. Chidima couldn't help but cry anew, but this time her tears were mixed with anger. She thought of all the times the children went without good food or clothes, all the times she herself endured sickness or hunger, because Akagom said there was no money to spare. Yet here it was. There was more than enough to have taken Obianuju to the hospital, to buy extra meat for Obiageri's celebration, to pay for better living conditions. He had let them suffer needlessly. One of the elderly neighbors placed a hand on Chidima's shoulder, sensing her feelings. "Ndo, sorry," the neighbor consoled. "Take heart. At least he left something behind for all of you." Chidima sniffed and nodded. Yes. He had left this money since he couldn't take it with him. It was now theirs to use. She decided right then that she would use it wisely to truly care for her family as Akagom had failed to do in life. They took a reasonable sum out of the bag to cover the funeral and transportation. Chidima, being a kind woman, even paid back a couple of neighbors who had lent her small amounts over the years when Akagom wouldn't provide. Gestures the neighbors deeply appreciated. Akagom was laid to rest in his village with modest dignity. Chidima did not splurge on an extravagant coffin or ceremony, knowing Akagom wouldn't have wanted that. And frankly, she still had a frugal mindset for practical things. After the burial, Chidima and the children returned to Onitsha with the remaining money. Back in the empty one-room apartment, they sat together and opened the Ghana must-go bag once more. It was time to plan their future. A future Akagom had always talked about saving for, but never truly allowed them to enjoy. "I will secure a better place for us to live," Chidima declared. It was the first major decision she made as the head of the family now. The children nodded eagerly. They all dreamed of living in a house where they didn't have to share a bathroom with an entire compound, where they could each have a little space to breathe. Within a few weeks, Chidima found a better apartment. It was a decent 3-bedroom flat in a nicer part of town. When the family moved in, it felt like a dream. The flat had a living room, a small kitchen, and even a private bathroom, luxuries they never had before. For the first time, Obiageri and Obianuju could share a room separate from their brother, and Chidima had her own bedroom as a widow. They painted the walls bright colors to make it cheerful. On the day they moved, neighbors from the old compound watched in amazement as trucks carried the family's belongings, plus new items Chidima had bought, like a proper dining table and new mattresses. Akagum's family is moving up in the world now, one neighbor commented. Another one chuckled. Yes, oh, they will finally enjoy his money now that he's gone. There was no malice in their tone, more like relief and happiness for the family's improved fortune. Obina ran from room to room in the new flat, excitedly opening every door and window. "Mama, we have our own toilet and running water," he shouted, as if they'd moved into a palace. Obiageri found a spot to set up a reading table for herself. She planned to study hard and perhaps go to university, now that the funds were there. Obianuju happily unpacked the new dresses and shoes her mother had bought for her and her sister, the first new clothes they'd gotten in a long time, not hand-me-downs or mended old ones. Chidima used some money to stock the kitchen with plenty of food, big bags of rice, beans, gari, yams, vegetable oil, spices, all the things she used to scrimp on. For once, the store was full and she didn't have to worry about measuring every grain. She even bought chicken and beef in the freezer, something they could only afford sparingly before. The children's eyes lit up seeing all the food. They felt secure knowing they wouldn't go hungry. That first night in their new home, the family decided to have a small feast, a kind of housewarming dinner with just themselves. Chidima cooked a rich pot of jollof rice with plenty of chicken pieces and fried plantains on the side. The delicious scent filled their new flat. They set the dining table with actual plates and spoons, not the mismatched plastic they used to use. There was even a cold bottle of orange soda for each child, a special treat. They all sat down and looked at the spread of food. It was far more than they ever had at one meal when Akagam was alive. For a moment a silence fell as they thought of him. Chidima, though enjoying the freedom, felt a bit of sadness. "If only your father had allowed moments like this when he was with us," she said quietly. Obiageri, wise beyond her years, replied, "Mama, Papa made his choices. We tried our best. Now he is gone, but at least he left this money which can give us a better life. I just hope, wherever he is, he understands now." "Yes," Chidima agreed softly. "I hope he understands." She then smiled and raised her glass of soda. "Come, let's cheer to a new beginning for our family. May we use this money well, and may we always have happiness and health." The children raised their glasses too. Clink went the toast. "Cheers," they all said and took a sip of the sweet fizzy drink, giggling at the bubbles, something they rarely got to enjoy. Dinner was joyful. The family laughed as Obina told a funny story about how he almost got in trouble at school for a prank. It was something he had hesitated to share with his strict father, but now felt free to talk about. They all ate to their fill, and even went for second helpings without fear. Obina piled his plate high with more rice and chicken until Obianuju joked, "Be careful or your stomach will burst." They all laughed. Obina grinned, "I'm making up for all the times I was still hungry, sister. Leave me, today I will eat well." Even Chidima allowed herself an extra piece of chicken without guilt. It felt so good to not worry about every little expense. After dinner, they put on the new television Chidima had bought. It was a small TV, but to them, it was wonderful. They watched a comedy show and laughed, feeling content. That night, they slept peacefully in their comfortable new beds with the fan blowing cool air. Yes, Chidima made sure to switch on the fan. They were no longer afraid to use a bit of electricity to be comfortable. However, as the family slept happily in their new home, not far away, something unusual was happening. Akagam's spirit, restless in the afterlife, found itself back in Onitsha, drawn to the place he had lived and the family he had left behind. In the dim space of the old one-room apartment, now empty and dark, as another tenant had not yet moved in, a faint, ghostly figure appeared. It was Akagam, or what remained of him, a transparent, shadow-like form of the man, still dressed in the last clothes he wore, looking confused. Akagam's ghost hovered in that familiar room, trying to make sense of his new existence. He remembered being very sick. He remembered a sense of peace, and then he saw Chidima crying and the children crying. He had tried to speak but couldn't. Then there was darkness, and now he was here. He looked down and realized, shockingly, that he could see through his own body. Am I a spirit? He thought aloud. His voice echoed softly, and no one heard him. Panicked, he floated out into the compound yard. Some neighbors were there, chatting in the evening. Akagam recognized them and rushed to a woman who often gossiped about him. Auntie Ngozi, he called out, trying to get her attention. But she continued talking to another man, oblivious to Akagam's presence. He reached out to tap her shoulder, but his hand went right through her. Like a puff of smoke, he passed through her and back. Akagam realized with a sinking feeling that indeed he was dead and now a ghost, invisible and unheard by the living. Immediately, his thoughts went to his money and his family. Where was his precious bag of money? Where were Chidima and the children? The last he remembered was them crying and the bag tied to him. Did they bury the bag with him? He hoped so, in some corner of his mind, so it would stay with him in the grave. He needed to know. In an instant his spirit drifted, almost pulled by an unseen force, to the new flat where his family now lived. Perhaps his love or worry for them drew him there. He found himself in the living room of a place he didn't recognize at first. It was nicely painted and furnished. There was a TV showing a night program, illuminating the room with flickering light. On the couch he saw them, Chidima and the children, fast asleep in front of the TV. They must have dozed off while watching. Akagam's ghost floated closer. He saw the remains of their feast on the dining table, an almost empty pot of jollof rice, plates with bones of chicken, empty soda bottles. His eyes, if ghosts have eyes, widened. A feast, chicken, soda. In his house. How? Then he noticed the Ghana must-go bag he valued so dearly. It was open and half full, tucked in a corner with some money still inside, but much of its contents had clearly been taken out and used. The truth hit him. His family was spending the money, his money. They had moved to a new home and were enjoying the comforts he always denied them. To any normal, loving father's spirit, this might bring a sense of relief or justice. But Akagam's reaction was different. He was horrified. Not because his family was finally living well, but because in his warped thinking, they were burning through the money he had saved so tightly. Akagam's ghost hovered over the sleeping family, wringing his transparent hands. "Chidima, children, what are you doing?" he shouted, but all that came out was a hollow whisper that merely rustled the curtains. They could not hear him at all. He floated to the dining table and saw the remains of the meal. In life, seeing a pot nearly empty like that after one meal would have made him angry about excess. Now he felt that old anger and panic rising. They cooked a whole pot of rice, and all that chicken, just for one night's meal, he exclaimed to the empty room. The only response was the soft hum of the refrigerator. They had a fridge now too, he noticed, another thing he never allowed. In frustration, Akagam's spirit tried to pick up the pot to see exactly how much was eaten, but his ghostly fingers passed right through it. He had no power to touch physical objects. Desperate to do something, he moved to where the Ghana must-go bag sat. Inside, he saw bundles of money remaining. It was a lot, but he could tell it was less than before. Perhaps about a third of what he had saved was already spent in a matter of weeks. To him, this was an unbearable thought. No, at this rate they will finish everything, he moaned. Slow down, Biko, don't finish it. He hovered over Chidima, who was dozing with her head resting on the couch. The ghost gently blew, trying to wake her with a chill breeze. Chidima stirred a little and wrapped her arms around herself, but did not wake. Chidima, it's me. Please hear me, Akagam whispered. Save the money. Don't spend too much at once. You need to budget, understand? Budget. Chidima shivered slightly from the cool draft that passed by, but in her half-sleep, she only murmured something and snuggled deeper into the couch. Obiageri, sleeping next to her, yawned and pulled a blanket over both of them. Akagam floated back, realizing that he was truly powerless to communicate. It was a strange punishment. He had refused to speak kindly or listen in life, and now, even if he wanted to, he could not speak to them in death. But that did not stop him from trying. Oh, he tried. Over the next days, or whatever time means to a ghost, Akagam's spirit roamed around following his family. He watched with dismay as Chidima paid a hefty advance for the new apartment's rent, money he would have haggled to the last naira. He trailed behind as she took the children to a good clothing store and bought new outfits and shoes for each of them. In the store, Obianuju held up a lovely dress, and Chidima happily paid for it. Meanwhile, Akagam's ghost was practically jumping up and down unseen, shouting, "Why buy new? Her old dress was still fine, and that price, did you even bargain well?" Other shoppers only felt a slight cold breeze, but didn't know why. When the family went to the market to buy nice provisions, Akagam followed. It was a comical sight, the family strolling through the open market, carrying bags of groceries, while behind them a worried ghost zigzagged, trying to snatch items from their hands or put cheaper ones in their cart, of course, all to no effect. Chidima picked out a large tuber of yam and paid the vendor generously. Akagam's ghost tried to push a smaller yam instead, but nobody noticed. Obina convinced his mother to get a new football, and Akagam wailed, "Football? Do you really need that now? That's N500 wasted." But the boy ran off delightedly with the ball in hand, completely oblivious. One evening, the family decided to go out and have a treat at a local eatery, something they had never done together when Akagam was alive. They went to a modest restaurant and ordered plates of spicy pepper soup and soft drinks. As they sat enjoying, Chidima said to the kids, "Your father never took us out like this, but I know he had his reasons. Still, I want you to enjoy a bit. You deserve it." They smiled and enjoyed the meal. Of course, Akagam's ghost was right there, hovering near their table with a gloomy face. To him, this was an unnecessary outing when food could be cooked at home for less. He watched each of them finish a whole bottle of Fanta soda and nearly cried out loud, "That's so much sugar and money!" But his protest came out only as a faint sigh of wind that barely rustled the table napkins. As time passed, Akagam's spirit grew more and more desperate and miserable. Not only had he died, which was bad enough, but now he had to witness what he considered the squandering of the fortune he devoted his life to saving. However, from an outside perspective, the family was not even being that reckless. Chidima had actually deposited a good portion of the money in a bank account for future needs and school fees, and was using a reasonable part to improve their immediate life. Yet Akagam's ghostly mind was so obsessed with not spending that any purchase at all made him panic. One night, Akagam's spirit drifted into the children's new shared bedroom. The girls were asleep on their bed, and Obina on his. The boy had his new football tucked beside him. The ghost looked at his children, and a strange feeling washed over him, something he hadn't truly felt when alive. Regret and sorrow, not for the money, but for how he had treated them. Seeing them sleeping peacefully now, well-fed and happier, he realized they had not been this content in a long time, and he, through his stinginess, had been the cause of their unhappiness. Akagam's ghost thought of how Obina used to beg for more food, how Obiageri wanted a celebration for her achievement, how Obianuju fell sick and he ignored her suffering. If ghosts could cry, Akagam would have wept at that moment. In a quavering voice only he could hear, he whispered to his sleeping children, "Forgive me. I didn't take care of you." Of course, there was no reply. Obina just snored softly, hugging his football. Shikagam's wife, too, he visited. Chidima was in her room saying her night prayers. She prayed aloud, "Dear God, thank you for providing for us. Thank you for this change in our life. I pray that Akagam's soul is at peace. I hope he is in a better place and understands why I must do what I'm doing for the children." She was speaking to God, but also, in a way, to her late husband. Standing unseen by her side, Akagam's spirit felt a deep ache. He wanted to answer, to tell her he was sorry and that he now knew he had been wrong. But each time he opened his mouth, his words came out as an unintelligible whisper. Frustrated, he let out a cry. It came only as a sudden gust that made the candle in Chidima's room flicker. She looked up, puzzled by the breeze in a closed room. "Perhaps a window is open somewhere," she murmured, then resumed praying and soon went to bed. Akagam's ghost slumped, as much as a floating figure can slump. He realized he was truly alone in this state. No one could hear him nag or plead about money now, and he was forced to see the truth. Life went on without him, and his family was actually better off spending the money he had hoarded. In the days that followed, he continued to roam around his family, fretting whenever they spent even a few naira. One afternoon he saw Chidima give some money to a poor beggar woman on the street. This would have made him furious in life, giving away money just like that. His ghost flew between Chidima and the beggar, waving his arms as if to block the charity, but of course it did nothing. Chidima handed the grateful woman a N500 note. The beggar blessed her. "May God bless you, madam. May the soul of your husband rest in peace." Chidima felt a strange chill when the woman said that, as if Akagam's soul indeed was near. She quickly moved on, a little spooked, but still satisfied at doing a good deed. If Akagam's ghost could tear its hair out, he would have, giving N500 away just like that, when he used to argue over N50 price differences. It was almost comical how upset he was, even as a spirit. More time passed. The family settled into a comfortable routine. Obiageri prepared to go to a university the next year, thanks to the funds available. Obianuju started a skill training program for fashion design, something she had dreamed of but assumed was impossible before. Obina joined a better secondary school and even got to play on a football team with a proper kit that Chidima bought. Chidima herself started a small business selling ladies' shoes in the market, using a bit of the money as capital so that she could keep earning and not just rely on the saved money. She was being prudent and smart, the way Akagam might have approved, but unlike him, she wasn't neglecting the family's happiness or needs. They no longer lived in luxury, but they lived well and with less worry. All this while, Akagam's spirit lingered, watching events unfold. Slowly, it dawned on him that his family was not being wasteful. They were building a life. They were actually doing the things he could have done with them, and still plenty of money would have remained. It was a powerful lesson for the ghost. Saving money is good, but hoarding it without purpose and without caring for the present only leads to regret. One evening, as the sun set in a red glow over Onitsha and the noise of the city calmed into a gentle buzz, Akagam's ghost found himself drifting back toward the old compound where he once lived. In the yard, a few of his old neighbors were chatting about him after hearing how his family was doing now. "Honestly, it serves him right the way things turned out," one man said, lighting his lantern. "Someone who refused to enjoy life at all. Now others will enjoy for him." A woman responded, "At least his family got something from all the suffering, but it's sad too. If he had been kinder and less stingy, he would be here with them enjoying as well." "Yes-o," the man agreed. "Money is meant to be used for good, not tied in a bag until you die. As the saying goes, a coffin has no pocket for you to take your riches along." Akagam's ghost hovered near them, listening. He realized people saw the truth clearly. He felt shame, wanting to tell them they were right. But as always, no sound came from him that humans could hear. A stray dog in the compound saw the ghostly figure and started barking at the seemingly empty air, startling the neighbors. "What's the dog barking at?" the woman asked, uneasy. "Maybe it sees a spirit," the man said, half-jokingly. Akagom's ghost drifted away. Even the dog couldn't scare him. He was too deep in thought. He went one last time to see his family. That night they were all gathered in the living room of their new home, having a small family prayer. Chidima prayed for Akagom's soul again, saying she forgave him and hoped he was at peace. Each child in turn also spoke, saying something kind about their father despite his flaws. Obina said he remembered how Papa taught him multiplication. Indeed, Akagom did tutor them sometimes, as it cost nothing. Obianuju said Papa always made sure they were safe at home, and Obiageri said though Papa was strict, he had built the foundation that now they could stand on. They expressed love and forgiveness. Akagom's spirit felt a weight lift. They did not hate him, they just suffered because of his actions, but they were healing and even remembering the good parts of him. Perhaps, he thought, this is what it means to find peace. He looked at the money bag in the corner. It was much emptier now, but the family was well. He looked at their faces, full of life and hope, not gaunt or sad like before. And he realized, finally, that this was the real wealth he'd overlooked. A happy, healthy family. If only he had realized it sooner, he would still be alive with them, partaking in that happiness. This was the beautiful twist of fate. The money he had saved was indeed used for the family's future, but he wasn't there to share in it. It was a bit funny and a bit sad and entirely of his own doing. Akagom's ghost stepped back. He felt himself growing fainter. Perhaps the love and forgiveness his family offered was releasing him from this earth. As he faded, he said in a gentle whisper, "Goodbye, my family. Live well and live happily. I was wrong, but I have learned my lesson too late." The breeze picked up gently in the room as if in answer. The family felt a calm presence, and Chidima even thought she heard a faint sigh. She smiled softly and murmured, "Farewell, Akagom." And so Akagom's spirit finally left to wherever spirits go, no longer bound to his bag of money or his earthly worries. As for Chidima, Obiageri, Obianuju, and Obina, they went on to live much better lives. They missed Akagom in their own ways, but they did not miss the hardship he had imposed. They cherished the freedom to eat well, to get an education, and to enjoy simple pleasures. In a way, Akagom's money did fulfill its purpose of caring for the family, but only after teaching them, and him, a profound lesson. Moral of the story: share and care for your loved ones while you are alive and well. Money is useful, but it is not more important than family. If you hold it too tight, you might lose both it and the chance to be happy. In the end, no one can take their wealth with them, and a life filled with love and laughter is far richer than one spent counting coins. And so the family lived happily ever after, free from stinginess and want, while the memory of Akagom lingered like a cautionary tale in the streets of Onitsha, reminding all who heard his story that generosity brings joy, and miserliness brings only regret. Thank you for watching this story on Afro Tales TV. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, leave us a comment, and share with friends and family. We have more beautiful stories coming your way, so subscribe and stay tuned. See you in the next one.